good, y'all? Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. How you guys doing? Debunking 5 myths about Wilt Chamberlain and 60s basketball, man. So, this is another highly requested video. Shout out to the person who did recommend this. Happy I am getting to it. So, yeah, if you guys are new to the channel, don't forget to hit the like and sub button. I appreciate it. Highly grateful like always. Also, how about my Knicks? 9 straight wins. Yes, sir. But anyway, let's go and get straight into it, man.
Era of Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain is easily the most.
Also, shout out to the guy who did make this video. Now, we're 2 seconds in. Will and Bill Russell seem like they're about to throw down. It's an old school backyard fight. Number 15 looks familiar, man. I want to say Hal Greer, but I'm not sure. But I do want to say number 15 is Hal Greer. I think, if I'm wrong, let me know in the comment section.
Disrespected and misconstrued era in NBA history. The foundation laid by the players that came before us is the reason we can enjoy the high level of play that we do today, and their achievements and feats should not be forgotten. In this video, I will rebut and debunk some of the arguments used by detractors of 60s basketball.
Also, shout out to the guy who did make this video. I think Big Star Productions. Shout out to him, man.
Many of these arguments are not used as statements of fact, but instead used to denigrate players from the 60s. I'm Big Star, and I hope you enjoy. Number 1. Players in the 60s worked part-time jobs outside the NBA. We're going to start with a partial myth that players in the 60s had to work second jobs outside the NBA. You'll see what I mean by partial myth when I start explaining, but for now, let's go into the origin of this myth. This myth most likely started from a Bleacher Report article written in 2010 by Ethan S., in which he stated, "Whereas in the modern era the NBA draws a larger pool of talent from around the country and internationally because of the exorbitant salaries, this is not the case back in the 1950s and 60s. Salaries were small. So small that many players held second jobs during the offseason to support their families."
I had no idea.
And the myth likely spread to a wider audience because of this video.
Bill Russell went to 12. Don't talk to me about Bill Russell and that time. He was playing against the corned beef king of Long Island. That's who he won his titles against. And then Oscar Robertson with his triple-double, he was playing against guys that were podiatrists in the offseason.
The reason I said this is a partial myth is because it does in fact hold some truth. A select few players in the early 60s had to work jobs in the offseason to support their family.
I didn't know that.
The reason this is a partial myth is because the exaggeration of the number of players that had to work offseason jobs. The players that had to work off-season jobs were the 11th or 12th men on the bench. The league.
Okay, yeah, that I could see that. I mean, do you think people like Bill Russell, Nate Thurman, Wilt Chamberlain, John Havlicek, they was working second jobs? No, because there's like the top players in the league in their time, Casey Jones, whatever. I mean, but if you was rotting the bench the whole game, not playing, then yeah, I would expect it, yeah.
The average salary for the NBA was $13,000 in the early 60s,
Jeez.
While the average yearly American family income in the 60s was around $6,700. This means on average, NBA players were making double what an average family was making.
Yeah.
And by the late 60s, the league raised minimum salaries even higher to make sure all players were well compensated. Number 2. Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain played against short white guys.
Okay, everybody, I know you were expecting something else, but as science will tell you, people were a lot shorter 2,000 years ago.
This myth is simply incorrect. It holds about as much truth as saying LeBron James played against short white guys because he played against Jason Williams, or saying MJ played against short white guys because he played against Danny Ainge and John Stockton. This myth stems from the fact that in the 60s, it was normal to list your height without shoes.
Hold up. Wade Halbrook was 7'3". Without shoes. Jesus. I've never heard of bro. Wes Unseld, 6'5" center. 6'5" center. Jeez.
Instead of with them.
270
and also
though.
because people have a tendency to confuse college basketball film from the 40s with NBA film from the 60s. Many players of the 60s were, on average, only about a half an inch to an inch shorter than the average player today, when taking into account the measurements were without shoes. This chart, courtesy of Basketball Breakdown, shows the average height of players from the inception of the NBA to 2015. As you can see, the average height of players throughout the 60s was around 77.5 inches or 6'4.5". If you added inches players today do due to shoes, the average height would be 6'5.5". Compare that to the average height from the 2000s to 2015, which would be around 79 inches, which is 6'6". This is of course a difference in height, but it's not as large as people may think. And it's important to remember, height and athleticism isn't everything.
True.
CP3 has been a top 5 point guard in the NBA his whole career. Isaiah Thomas dominated the league and was getting MVP votes just 2 seasons ago. John Stockton, Allen Iverson, and the bad boy Pistons Isaiah Thomas, these were all Hall of Fame talents that were right at 6 foot tall and not extremely athletic.
Facts, man. Hard over. Hey, that's true, man. That is true. Hey, solid point. Chris Paul, I think Chris Paul like 5'10", 5'11", really. John Stockton, Isaiah Thomas, two up like 27, 28 at like 5'9" with Boston. Too bad he got hurt, like, his hip, but that's true, man. Height doesn't mean everything. You know what I mean? You can still dominate games.
Skill is just as important, if not more important, on the basketball court. Number 3, Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain played against weak competition. I could have included this with the last myth, but this topic needs more explanation beyond simply saying there were tall players back then too. This myth extends from the short white guys myth, and any level of research can disprove it. Here is a list of some of the centers Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell had to play against. Willis Reed, 6'9.5". For a comparison, he is just as tall as Al Horford. Nate Thurman, 6'11", one of the best defensive centers of the time. For a comparison, he is just as tall as Andre Drummond. Walt Bellamy, who measured the same height and weight as Boogie Cousins, 6'11", 270. And later in Wilt Chamberlain's career, he spent a few years going against a young Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who of course is one of the greatest centers of all time. All these centers were skilled, whether it be Willis Reed's jump shot, Nate Thurman's defense, or Bellamy's ability to finish at the rim. But the biggest reason for the toughness of Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain's competition lies in the fact that there were only 8 teams in the NBA at the time.
True.
Even though there were 8 teams, there was still an 82-game schedule. So
Jesus. 82 game schedule. You playing against the same 7 teams in a row. I mean, it's 8, but if you're playing on one team, you're playing the same 7 teams in a row. Golly, man. I mean, it's a battle because you're going against, the top players. Back then, that all those bigs. You know what I mean? Will against Bill Russell. Oh my gosh, 5, 6, 7, probably 8 times a year. Going against Kareem, Nate Thurman, you have to bring your game still, man. You have to bring your A game. Because these were some Hall of Fame players we're talking about. Hall of Fame players.
Chamberlain had to go against Bill Russell around 11 times a year. Same for Willis Reed.
Yeah, 11 times a year? Jeez. Bring your A game.
Walt Bellamy and Kareem. And he would have to go against Nate Thurman 6 times a year. That's over half the season facing Hall of Fame talent at his position. Imagine LeBron James playing Kevin Durant and the Warriors 6 times every season, or the Warriors playing the Spurs 11 times every season.
That's crazy.
For the time, that's quality basketball night in and night out. Those were matchups you would always look forward to.
If I was a fan, I would have been loving it. You know what I mean? Seeing Kareem against Wilt 6, 7, 8 times a year. Oh my gosh. Thank God we got more teams now, because you probably you will get probably eventually bored, I'll say. But I don't know. Personally, me, I personally wouldn't get bored because I'm watching Hall of Fame talent every night. So,
number 4, the time machine argument.
Future. Boy, Squidward.
This is going to be less of a debunking and more of a rebuttal to perhaps the most frustrating argument for me to hear as an NBA fan. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, the time machine argument is whenever a fan says, if you take a player from the 60s and put him in the NBA right now, he wouldn't be nearly as good.
I see why people want to, I'm sorry I keep pausing, I see why people want to argue that point, but it's so hard to compare eras, man. It's hard to compare somebody from the 60s to now. With the way the game is now, which every position, every player basically has to shoot. even freaking Andre Drummond, we have seen him shoot some threes. Even Dwight Howard, Dwight Howard shot some threes this year.
This argument also.
So Wilt would still been. I feel like Wilt was still been dominant, man, in the league. 7'1", almost 300 pounds. Come on now.
Works for other eras, as some people nowadays have been saying. If you take Michael Jordan and put him in the NBA today, he wouldn't be nearly as good.
Yeah, he would.
The other way around is if a player from back then says of right now, if you take a player from right now and put him back in the 60s or earlier era, he wouldn't be nearly as good. You can hear this from some MJ fans saying LeBron James couldn't make it back in a more physical 80s and 90s era. These arguments serve no purpose other than to denigrate the older or younger generations. There is no accurate way to compare the old generation to the newer one or vice versa.
True.
The way players cross over today would be called a carry in the 60s. The way players back other players down would be a charge in the 60s. Dunking on other players was seen as disrespectful in the 60s and just wasn't done as often, simply due from the fact that backboards could break and a
Wait. So if I dunked on you, got my nuts all in your face, that is disrespectful. All right.
broke, there's a
all
good
right.
chance the game might just end there. On the other hand, a player from the 60s dribbles would not be as effective in today's game.
True.
Guards from the 60s would need more shooting range in today's game.
That's what I'm saying. That's probably Bob Cousy. That's what I'm saying. It's hard to compare eras. Like players from different eras compared to now. Like it's hard because the way basketball was played was so different.
Centers from the 60s would need to be more willing to throw their weight around when backing players down in the post and simply dunk on everyone.
Yeah, Bob Cousy.
Not to mention the fact that players in the 60s didn't have the weight training regimens, sports science advancements, nutrition plans, transport by private jet, trainers, salaries, the foul calls, and many other things that players today have and benefit from. It's best not to compare eras. As a fan, it's natural that we do it though. If you want to have a legitimate argument about a player in a different era in today's game, to do it this way. Wilt Chamberlain measures 7'1" without shoes. With shoes, he'd be around 7'2" with a wingspan of 8 feet. Now let's just imagine a 7'2" athletic big man with an 8-foot reach was about to be drafted. He ran track in college and actually ran the 100-yard dash in less than 11 seconds and had a high jump record of 6 feet 6 inches.
Don Stewart, SMU, clears the high jump at 6'6" and a quarter. Followed by basketball star Wilt Chamberlain of Kansas, who matches the mark and wins the coin toss for first place.
With his vertical leap being around 44 to 48 inches. And if you don't believe me, take a look at this clip. He has unbelievable stamina and would be able to play 40 plus minutes a game immediately. Not only can he jump out of the gym, but he is as strong as an ox, posting a bench press PR of 400 pounds out of college. That's more than Dwight Howard can bench in his prime. He has a plethora of post moves, fadeaway jumper, finger roll over short defenders, numerous fakes and counters. His only weakness are his lack of real shooting range and his free throw percentage. That sounds like a top 3 pick to me. The reason we should use this method other than the time machine method is because this comparison is more fair to each side. Older players would need to benefit from the same resources today that players from today benefit from, and that includes studying from those who came before.
Right.
60s players didn't get to watch film of older players because that technology didn't exist when they were growing up. Nowadays, you can open YouTube and have hundreds of hours of film ready to go to learn the game. This is the way to go if you want an unbiased, fair comparison of both sides.
Facts.
Number 5. Wilt Chamberlain wasn't a team player and Russell outperformed him in individual matchups.
What was the toughest thing for you playing against Wilt?
You could not. I could never play him the same way 2 games in a row because it would not work. And so,
yeah, and they was game, and they was playing against each other 6 to 8 times a year, or whatever, 11. But I mean, if Bill Russell was playing for Boston, of course, and then Wilt was playing for Philly, that's about 11 times in a row. I mean that's about 11 times a year they was going against each other. And Bill said he couldn't play them. So every game they play against each other, those 11 times or whatever, it had to be different. That's crazy, man.
The whole time we
That's respect. That's respect. Big respect to Bill.
And now we've come to the final myth of the
Big
video.
respect to Wilt.
I can understand how this myth came about.
To Bill.
Michael Jordan has all the rings while LeBron has the numbers. Excuse me. What I meant to say was, Bill Russell has all the rings while Wilt Chamberlain has all the numbers. More specifically, Wilt Chamberlain lost 7 to 8 playoff series to Bill Russell. But let's dive deeper into the story to see if we should really blame Wilt Chamberlain or if there were circumstances to him losing. After researching the ways Chamberlain lost to Bill Russell and the Celtics, I just have to say it's unfortunate. As I said earlier, Wilt played 7 series against Bill Russell. Well, of those 7 series, 4 of them went to Game 7. And of those 4 Game 7s, Wilt lost every single time. But the worst part is that he lost them all by a grand total of 9 points over 4 games. So how did he end up losing this way so many times? As I said, it's unfortunate. Every time it wasn't Chamberlain's fault. In one of the games his teams didn't pass to him for the entirety of the second half. He touched the ball twice in the second half, but it was blamed on him for the loss. In another Game 7...
How you gonna give Wilt the ball twice in the playoffs? In the second half, he only touched the ball twice, or they only found the ball twice. Twice, 2. Psh, no wonder y'all lost. Do you know who y'all have on the team?
As the Celtics were one of the best fast break teams in the NBA at the time, he figured it would be better for the team if he checked out to gather himself. As the clock is winding down, he asked the coach to put him back in. What does the coach do? He says, the team is playing better without you, and he doesn't put Wilt back in. The Celtics go on to beat the Lakers, and once again, Wilt is blamed. The Lakers fired the coach after the season was over for not putting in their best player in a Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Imagine Tyronn Lue not putting LeBron in a Game 7 against the Warriors, or Stephen Curry hitting multiple threes back to back to back in the fourth quarter of the finals, and Steve Kerr taking him out of the game. The NBA world would be cooking the coach for mistakes like that. But since Wilt was the leader and the best player on the team, he caught the lion's share of the blame in the public eye. Being one of the biggest and strongest players at the time didn't really work in his favor for this instance. Being as he was so strong and so dominant, people saw him as being able to take over a game no matter what and win, even when he was not on the court for some reason. His third loss, Chamberlain put on a clutch performance by scoring his team's final 5 points, including an and one to tie the game. But Celtics legend Sam Jones ended up coming off a pick and hitting a deep shot that won the Celtics the game. And finally, his last Game 7 loss to the Celtics came from one of the most memorable plays in basketball history.
5 seconds left. Boston only has a 1-point lead. Greer's putting the ball on a play. He gets it out deep, and Havlicek steals it.
Oh, yeah.
Havlicek stole the ball. It's all over. It's all over. Johnny Havlicek is being mobbed by the fans. Bill Russell wants to grab Havlicek. He hugs him. He squeezes John Havlicek. The Celtics win it. 110 to 109.
Damn.
Wilt's teammate makes a bad pass and they lose the game by 1. Beyond the losses to Bill Russell, no one mentions how Wilt played for 8 coaches in 14 years, including a stretch where he played for 4 coaches in 5 years from 1960 to 1965.
I didn't know that.
Or how in the 143 games Chamberlain played against Russell, Chamberlain averaged 29 points and 28 rebounds. That's double the points Russell put up against Chamberlain and quadruple the rebounds, including a...
So statistically, Wilt was really outplaying Bill, but Bill was winning. So, I mean, I'm taking dubs over stats. I want to win. I don't care what my stat line is. If we win, that's all I care about. I mean, you know, I still want to perform, but as long as we win, I'm fine with that.
A 55 rebound performance, or how during the 1967-1968 season, Wilt led the league in assists with 702, which would make him the only center in NBA history to lead the league in assists to this day. That's an average of 8.6 assists per game, while having nights where he put up 22 points, 25 rebounds, and 21 assists. That's insane. Not to mention, Wilt could block the most unblockable shot in NBA history,
hook shot.
Kareem Skyhook. And listen to this. He was jumping that high at the age of 36 after coming off multiple knee surgeries.
That's crazy.
Look, I can go on and on about Wilt's statistical achievements, but I'll just leave this video off with a comparison that I believe is fitting. What most NBA fans today call LeBron James selfish for putting up amazing numbers but losing to the Warriors over and over and over. Would anyone say KD or Steph has had better performances than LeBron in the finals in the last few years? I don't think so. One team is a dynasty, the other team is a legendary player trying to do it all.
Y'all let me know in the comment section what y'all think.
Personally, I find the accomplishments of David more impressive than that of Goliath. Well, that's it for the video. I hope y'all really enjoyed it. I really like to hear the type of videos y'all would like to see.
So I guess that's it, man. Hey, shout out to him again, man. But sheesh. All right, we learned a lot. I learned a lot. You guys don't forget to like and sub and comment down below your thoughts and reactions. See you guys later.